Hi everyone, so I'm Phoebe and I'm the latest takeaway mentor to talk to you about overcoming race nerves, which seems to be a particular problem that has surfaced with the return to racing after the lockdowns. So I'm going to try and split it down into short-term and long-term strategies. So obviously long-term strategies, you can't just switch on the day before a race or the day of the race, but short-term ones are things that can help get into a positive mindset and also hopefully calm and settle some nerves that you may have on race day themselves. So the main one when it comes to long-term strategies for overcoming nerves is to just train really well, because if you've trained well and consistently for the period leading up to the race, you should be able to trust your fitness and trust in your ability to perform. I quite like being able to do race-specific sessions just before I race, because that then gives me an idea of what sort of fitness I'm in, so I can set realistic expectations for myself as well as target paces that I know I should be able to hit, and that then makes it easier for when you go into the race. So examples may include something like 6 by 500 metres off 90 seconds, gives you quite a good idea of your 1500 metre pace, or 16 400s off 45 seconds gives quite a good idea of your 5k pace. The other thing to bear in mind is to put your race at a time when you'll be relaxed in the week, so you won't have gone out or had lots of late nights, so you'll be putting your body in the best position that it can be in order to perform well. If you're doing it at the end of the week, then that can add nerves, because you can be like, oh well, I might be a bit tired or things like that. So in terms of more short-term stuff, this is all about establishing a positive mindset just before you race and like knowing that it's going to go well. And one of the things that I find really helps with that is trying to get into quite a good race routine. So one that you can trust and know that if you do and you just perform it, you will be fine. So I think that this is slightly different to getting hung up on sort of superstitions, so like specific foods, lucky socks, lucky pants. I always used to wear the same pants and have the same meal the evening before I raced, but as soon as I then started travelling with teams, whether they were just Kent or national teams or whatever, it then got really difficult to always ensure that you had the same foods. So I had to relax them, but then I realised that as long as I still had the same sort of routine, it didn't matter exactly what it was, but that was still fine. However, if it was something like comfort, so you always wear the same socks because they're really comfy and they don't give you blisters, then yes, that's fair enough, keep something like that in. And the other thing that you can sometimes try is sort of like supplements, so like beetroot juice or caffeine, because these have got some sort of evidence of performance enhancing effects, and they might just make you feel a bit better and just feel a bit more prepared to race. And they can also trigger your body into sort of thinking, oh, this is race time, if you only have it when you race. So I only take caffeine before I race, so I think that my body knows like, oh, you need to concentrate, it's race time, whenever it experiences caffeine. But then on the flip side to this is the idea of just races actually aren't that important. It's actually really quite insignificant. Who actually cares at the end of the day how you do? Obviously there are going to be a very few close network friends and family, but generally work colleagues, your wider set of friends, even quite a lot of family members are unlikely to know or fully understand what race it is. And so if you go to them, if you're younger and it's like, oh, the English schools, how do you explain that? Well, it's kind of a national thing, but we've done the Kent schools and all of that sort of stuff to get there. And so, whereas if you're older, then there's all sorts of different leagues and inter-counties can mean different things in different sports as well. So I think just remembering that actually, to the majority of people, your race is really not that important. Sometimes helps me to be like, well, it's not the end of the world if I go badly, because no one actually really cares. And also, generally, there will be a race, and exactly the same one next year or later in the season. So if Nationals goes badly, there will be a National next year. But this is now obviously slightly not true because of COVID. But generally, you can just be like, well, you know, I've got next year, and hopefully it'll go better next year. And then this one really helped me, and it sounds a bit odd, but it's a sort of visualization idea. So I like to zoom out, and so I imagine the field or the track that I'm running on, and then you zoom out and you imagine you're looking at it from a bird flying over it, and you're like, well, I can just about see what's going on. I can see a few people moving around, but actually in the whole scheme of the world, or like the whole landscape, it's not very big. And then if you zoom out again so that you're just looking at Earth, say from space, you can't even see the race. And then if you zoom out again, so you're then looking at it from like the universe, and you can only see the planets, and even each planet is tiny and all the stars are tiny, then your race just becomes really insignificant. And as part of the wider universe, it's really not a big deal. And although that sounds a bit of a weird way, I quite like it as a way of showing to myself that everything will keep going. Like, there will be generations still to live on the planet afterwards. This is not the end of the world. So the other thing that you can then do after racing is to reflect on it. So part of the idea of reflecting is to look at goals and whether you achieve them or not. So the key to this is to set realistic goals based on training, and also make them process goals as opposed to outcome goals, because you cannot control outcome goals. You can only control process goals. So process goals could be things like, oh, hit that hill hard, or push on at this point, or get to this distance in this time. Whereas an outcome goal would be something like, oh, I want to beat X, or get X time. If you don't have a process in place to get there, you won't be able to achieve your outcome goal. And your outcome goal is also dependent on lots of other things. So it could be dependent on how well X races, or how badly they feel, and then they don't race very well, but you can still beat them, and then you're like, well, I beat them, but I'm still not very happy because my goal was to beat on them, if that makes sense. And also, if you're going for a certain time, obviously that's weather dependent. So if you can try and make it more of a process, then you can also have a higher chance of making them, and then you can feel more positive afterwards as well. And also, if you do race badly, it really doesn't matter, because you can't race well every time, because then you wouldn't have good races. All your good races would then become average races, and then you'd have to try and have some good ones and some bad ones again to get back to average. Whereas if you keep just going up and up, you'll always just have average races, and you won't get that good race feeling, which everyone really enjoys. But if you do race well, the key is to note down exactly what you did. So what you ate when, and how it worked, and how it felt. So I would say that the ultimate message, though, is just to try and race regularly. And I know that's easier said than done at the moment because of COVID, but if you try and race regularly so it doesn't become a big thing, and just keep it in perspective, so just zoom all the way out and look at it from the universe where you can't even see the race, that hopefully keep things in perspective and you shouldn't worry so much about it.